There goes the video. And there goes the microwave. I guess I better start talking. Good morning. Today is the 24th day of August. It is almost September, which is kind of cool. It means I've been divorced about a year. But today is day 104, my second year. And if we can get over the animals making noises behind me, I want to make a video today. I'm not too sure what the topic of it is going to be. I'll say what set it in motion, and then I'll work my way through it. And that's kind of my style with my videos, is I kind of stream of consciousness, hopefully. But what happened? We'll start with that. Our current president, commander-in-chief of our military, has an axe to grind with transgender people. He's looking to raise money to build a wall between us and Mexico. And he's kind of got some people who have kind of said, look, we can't, or we have transgender people in our military, and, if we'll give you, to get our support, or, money for your wall, etc., etc. So he's kind of said, well, it costs a lot for transgender people in the military, so we're just not going to have transgender people in the military anymore. And he sent out a tweet, which for future generations is a computer program that lets you speak your mind in 128 characters or less. And anyway, that's about as much of a coherent thought as I think he actually has. But it set my mind in motion somewhat about military. And I want to talk a little bit about my experience with the military. And as this is my transition channel, that's kind of where this all kind of comes together, and transgender, military, whatnot. So this is kind of going to be a big Robin background video. So if that's not your thing, that's cool. Click on to the next one. I was born in a log cabin I was born in Florida in the 1970s, 1972. And like most kids, I thought military stuff was pretty cool. Had G.I. Joes. I played a lot of Star Wars guys, actually, but I love G.I. Joe. To a certain degree, the military. And even though I knew I was transgender, I didn't quite know how to deal with it. And of course, G.I. Joe, you've got Scarlet, Lady J, you have women in the military. So it really wasn't a military, non-military thing. But when I was about elementary school, I thought about a lot of things. I thought about being a priest, which, probably would have been an okay thing. A Catholic, want to be a Jesuit priest. But I also thought about the military. And I loved flamethrowers, the concept of a flamethrower. Now, I had not actually seen what a flamethrower can do to a person, and having seen something like it on YouTube, just in movies and whatnot, and I guess where I am today in my life and the person I am today, I would find that somewhat abhorrent, wanting to consume another person, a human being, in fire. That said, if you have someone, again, from a military point of view, and you're fighting somebody and they're in a bunker or a building of some kind that has an air vent, if you can get a flamethrower in there, there's a lot of, and again, movies and depictions of whatnot, usually in a good World War II movie, or Normandy, storming the beaches of Normandy, you've got a machine gun nest or a bunker of some kind, and they walk right up if they can, and the flamethrower is what does the damage. And even in the game Warhammer 40K, if you have a flamethrower, you can ignore cover with it. Anyway, so the bottom line is, I wanted to be a flamethrower person, and there was a G.I. Joe, and I remember his uniform was kind of red and orange, and he was the flamethrower dude. And I just thought it was really, really cool. I thought flamethrower, yeah, okay. Don't make a conclusion that I'm a pyromaniac or whatever else. But and again, as an adult and as a trans woman, I don't I don't get jollies or whatnot off that. But that was my idea until someone said something about, yeah, a flamethrower is a good thing till you get a bullet in the back, or you explode or whatnot. And I was like, well, damn, I guess I can't be a flamethrower. It's probably not a smart thing to do. So then I thought about tanks. I mean, I love tanks. I still do love tanks today, mechanized vehicles and whatnot. And so I kind of had a thing for the Army. Okay, this is where I'm going with this. Navy, not so much. Air Force was okay. But really, the Army, tanks and everything else, that really sounded kind of cool to me. As I grew up and I became more and more fat and obese, physical things were a challenge. Push-ups, pull-ups, or whatnot. And so I kind of developed a fear of boot camp, to be honest with you, of, strenuous exercise for a prolonged period of time. Things that I just couldn't do. There were people at my school, football players and whatnot, who could run around the track and had the stamina. Again, it's kind of like someone who plays sports. They develop a skill or whatnot. And so really, as far as a soldier goes, someone who can carry a pack and, a lot of stamina and then control to shoot a gun and whatnot, I didn't have it. I didn't have the physical. And while you could say, well, you could develop that or whatnot, there's just limitations to my body frame and whatever. And not to make an excuse, but I recognized I'd have trouble with basic or whatnot. And so really it was my dad who kind of nudged me towards the Air Force. And I loved space. I loved aerospace. I loved rockets and planes. Anyway, so yeah, aerospace engineering, it seemed like a pretty good fit. But again, I lived kind of in fear of basic training. I lived kind of in fear of that physical, demanding thing, which rational or irrational, it was a fear of mine. But I had the intent on going to the Air Force Academy, being a cadet, becoming an Air Force officer, going into NASA, space program or something. Not an astronaut, but I mean the design work and whatnot. And as is often the case with transgender, and I'm going to say trans women for myself, I put a lot of my transgender stuff on the back burner. I don't think I was tampering, doing something ultra macho, ultra manly to put off being transgender. But again, I was more involved in scouts at the time. Anyway, so the push was Air Force. So in college, I did not get into the Air Force Academy, but we were hoping to get in at a later date. So I started college at Air Force ROTC, and I was a butter bar, second lieutenant, Okay. And at that time in college, my first year of college, that's really when the transgender, the dysphoria really hit. I mean, that was when I recognized something's not right. I know something's not right. I was afraid of talking about it to myself. And so that really was my freshman year. It also didn't help with that fear of basic training. At the detachment, weekly we would have inspections, uniform inspections, and they would put us in two rows, a row and then a row for inspection. And seeing in the back row, you would keep your focus straight ahead, but when someone wasn't looking in your peripheral vision, your eyes would kind of wander. And I happened to see on more than one occasion where two, not commanding officers, and I want to say senior cadets, but the next level up, higher ranking cadet, higher ranking ROTC officer, whatnot. And I can't think of the name of him. But anyway, a higher ranking person, went up behind someone and totally made up, your uniform. Did you even wash your uniform? Kind of abusive. And totally, I could see straight ahead. I could see their uniform. There was nothing wrong with it. And they totally said, you've got a stain on your back and da 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 da. And after that, I kind of began to, the individual in me said, you know what, I am not going to be part of an organization that basically hazes or comes up with shit. I mean, yeah, as a cadet, if I spent time to make sure my shoes were shined, my uniform was good, everything was polished, everything was clean, had the high and tight, my hair was in place, and everything was in regulation. And I realized the system, I wasn't about to do that, and it also didn't help that I had a little woman, I had a little girl inside of me going, let me out, let me out. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And so that contributed to me leaving college. My gender dysphoria really messed up my life at that time. Not the first time, not the last time, but at that time, dropped out of college, went and lived with my mom for a year. But while I was active in ROTC, I did get decorated. I had gotten the medal was from the Sons of the American Revolution. I was in the detachment. I mean, I was in, I'd gone through scouting and I was an Eagle Scout and everything. I mean, I bought into the whole thing, and that's cool. And I really envied my ROTC, my army ROTC guys who would go on base and do stuff. And even though they did stuff with rubber guns and everything, it was still cool, and still, I really, if I had my druthers, I think it'd be cool to be on a tank crew. I mean, that's just awesome. But there's some realities to that. But anyway, that aside, that really was my, I didn't really have a, I want to go out there and kill people, which I'm not saying is what military is for, but military does exist to provide security, to kill people and break things as necessary in other places. So, again, it wasn't that kind of a thing. I didn't have a burning desire to do that. For me, it really was kind of a means to an end. I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, and my parents were kind of pushing me towards the Air Force Academy, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, my gender confusion and dysphoria really messed that up, among other things. It wouldn't be like I said, not the last time, but it definitely destroyed everything. And I say that somewhat now, commenting on the military, because I like to think, and I could be mistaken, that if you had a person, we'll call him Joe, Joe's transgender, and Joe joins the service or is about to join the service or is in the service, and Joe decides, you know what, I can't put off my transgender stuff anymore. I'm going to be called Joanna. And Joanna is a lieutenant or a command, I'm more familiar with Air Force and Army stuff, so I can't really say what the Navy equivalent is, but Joanna is a middle level officer, and it has a command, or maybe not, just works somewhere as a clerk or somewhere, and so, as any company, and I think the United States military is the largest employer in the world of Americans, any company, you kind of support that if you can. And so I try to imagine Joe becoming Joanna. In any company, you're going to have a bit of transition and everything else. And surely if Joanna is, monitors air traffic at an Air Force base, it really doesn't matter, Joe or Joanna. You know what I mean? Now, if Joe happened to be a Navy SEAL and, as a black ops, wet ops operative, requires, super upper body strength and the ability, kung fu, and I apologize if I'm insulting anyone by this idea, but a super killing machine, that might affect Joanna's future. However, I've seen some women that kick ass. And I mean, like, I've seen women in the UFC, in the octagon, who totally would kick my ass. But I mean, you know what I mean? Bad motherfucker. Bad mother. You know what I mean? So the idea that you would kick Joanna out because, well, can she pilot the inflatable raft? Yes, she can. Can she pull a gun trigger? Yes, she can. Does her kung fu, isn't it awesome? And isn't she still a weapon of destruction? Yes. So to say to Joanna, in light of recent events, I'm sorry, the military is, you're no longer welcome, and here's your discharge papers. To me, that's not really right, because Joanna can function. She can be a kick-ass martial artist. She can pull a trigger. She can launch a missile. She can command people. And it bothers me in that I feel like you have people outside of the military, or even in the military, who are just saying, it's almost like they're just saying, well, no, Joanna, we can't have Joanna because Joanna's a woman now. And that's something that, is an argument from, should women serve in the military? And again, is the question, it's Joe is now Joanna. Is that the problem? Is it really the problem? Is it because she's a woman? And if it is, then you gotta deal with, should women be allowed in the military? Should women be allowed to fight? I've seen some photos of some A-10 pilots, some Warthog pilots that are women. And again, you can't you can't have it both ways. You can't be equal in whatever and not equal at the same time. And you probably could say the same thing if you had a woman who, let's say, you had Jessica. And Jessica was in the military, and now Jessica wants to become Jake. And again, in an all-female unit, maybe, again, if there's problems with mixing men and women, okay, there might be an issue. But does that mean that Jake can't fire a gun or storm? You know what I mean? It's like there's got to be a job for Jake, as there's got to be a job for Joanna. And I know, as when I went through ROTC, there were a number of Air Force clerks, non-commissioned officers who pushed paper, who typed letters. I mean, not to be stereotypical, but you know what I mean? There's a job for everybody. But that said, I'm trying to figure out where I'm going with that. So, to me, it really comes off as kind of a group of minority, I'm going to say white men, old men, who are just, they don't want to see women in the military. And you could say, well, that's not what it's about. It's about transgender. Well, a man who becomes a woman becomes a woman. A woman who becomes a man starts off as a woman. Okay, so it's about this woman, or I'm gonna say an effeminate, or in some slang, a fairy or a faggot or a homosexual. To me, that's really what this is about. And one could say, well, what about the cost? The cost, oh, that's what Trump's presidents, the cost is too high. Well, when you look at how much they spend for Viagra as opposed to how much they spend for hormones, the military is spending more money on giving erections than they are hormones. And then you say, well, no, it's not that. It's the logistics of it. You got to have, the hormones are going to get there, and they can't do this, they can't do this. Well, I feel like you could say the same argument for like a diabetic and their insulin. Private Santiago. You can't go on this mission because you might not get your insulin, and you're a liability. And it's like, wait a minute. And again, maybe Private Santiago can't go on the Black Ops mission to kill somebody in a foreign country, but there are a lot of jobs for Private Santiago, And so again, I think it kind of defeats that whole, it diffuses some of those arguments. And someone else, I saw an internet meme that said something like, not everyone has the right to serve. Well, is that true? I mean, let's assume for the moment you have a quadriplegic or a paraplegic. I mean, you have someone in a wheelchair. To me, in my mind, there's a job for everybody. The military needs people who can support back home. Just because you can't carry a rucksack 20 through hell and high water doesn't mean there's not a place for you. And again, I feel like my opinion is going to get dismissed anyway, because it's like, well, you didn't serve, you're not in the military one. And I guess that's why I had to kind of tell my first story. There was a time when I really did have an interest, but I knew my own limitations and my own shortcomings. And, again, it's one of those things. I do think people have skills, and to get a job that uses a skill that you kind of enjoy, that's like gravy. And so, if there's an admiral, I mean, you would hope that an admiral, your people who actually do the strategy have the skill and the history and the knowledge to do naval strategy in the same way that a ground forces or a tank commander, again, has the knowledge and the education and the drive and whatever else. I don't see where gender comes into that, and that kind of cuts to the, like I said, what this is about. And obviously we know it's about, in our current, president, his desire to build a wall, and he's looking for money. And all this said, I always kind of come back to, someone who is in charge of the federal government. I always want to say, what are you doing to tackle increasing our gross national product? What are you doing to grow, to lower our amount of unemployment? What are you doing to lower, our hunger situation? What are you doing to raise the citizens, the standard of living up, and tackling some of our problems, which you would look for a government to do? And instead of like making our world, the United States, a better place to live, it just seems very nitpicky. And someone had said, Julie, I think it was, said something about transgender. We're low-lying fruit. It's easy for them to grab something and make a political posture or a statement of some kind. But anyway, so that's my spiel. So that's what started it, was, this question of military and transgender and whatnot. And I went into a little bit about my history and kind of where I'm at. And, again, at this point, I had a moment where I was like, yeah, shit, I want to do it. But again, I know my limitations. But, again, it just doesn't. The current president doesn't make sense about a lot of things, but this is, to me, it's one of them. But I think all this said, and I may be running a little long, but our military, I lost it. Military service I think is one of those things that, and I'm going to again put this for trans women, you know, when we're dealing with our feelings, one way of pushing them away is to do something hyper masculine, whether it be stereotypically, you know, working on cars or getting guns or hunting or joining the service. And, you know, we get ourselves in a situation where we feel like we can't do something about being transgender. And, you know, here's a situation where it is kind of set up. And, you know, now it's, you know, I mean, the pendulum is kind of swinging the other way now. And, you know, again, that's something that I'm just sharing my own experience in what I had to do. Yeah. But I love, like I said, I love our military. I'm not against the military. I'm not that. And even the commander in chief, and he probably doing what he thinks is right. But, you know, to turn your back on at least 15 to 20% of those actively serving and saying you're no longer welcome, what do you do with all those people that are currently serving? And, you know, you're going to discharge them all? Are you going to give them an honorable discharge so they get veterans care and benefits? Or are you going to give them a dishonorable discharge? I mean, it's like one person's posturing and political posturing is going to affect so many people. And again, to me, it comes across as just a bunch of homophobic people who equate a trans woman as being a gay male, or saying that women shouldn't serve. So, you know, again, it's, to me, that's what it's really about. So, all right, well, that said, and probably not very well, that's my experience. And I hope that everyone is doing super duper cool, and life will continue. And good luck on your journey, and I'll keep chugging away at mine, okay? All right, my friends, till next time. Bye. Thank you for your time.